Know yourself. We hear that everywhere. But what if that's the wrong place to start? The more we chase certainty about who we are, the tighter we grip, and the more life slips through our fingers. The Buddha never said, find yourself. He pointed somewhere quieter, toward wonder, toward not knowing, toward a heart small enough to be held, and vast enough to hold everything. Today, I'll share what he meant. One evening, as the sun began to sink below the trees, a small forest, threaded through by a branch of the Ganges. The only sound was the quiet pull of water over stone. The disciples had each found their own place to sit, watching in silence as the light slowly left the sky. The air that day carried a certain weight. One student had been carrying a question inside his chest for a long time, and today he had made up his mind. Today he would finally say it aloud. The cicadas fell suddenly quiet. A breeze moved through the leaves. In that stillness, the student rose to his feet. The earth beneath him still held the warmth of the afternoon sun. He walked slowly toward the teacher, each step pressing into the soft ground, as if the path itself were asking him to reconsider. In his hands he carried nothing, and yet his arms felt heavy, as though he were bearing a stone he had long forgotten how to set down. The student's name was Malankaputta. He was a sharp, restless mind. Long before he came to walk the path, he had loved learning, loved turning questions over, pressing at them until an answer came loose. That was simply who he was. But as the months of practice wore on, something had begun to build inside him. A low, steady frustration. Because the Buddha had never answered him. Not once. Does the world go on forever, or does it end? Is the universe finite or infinite? Is the soul something apart from the body? Does a person continue after death, or simply cease? These were the questions that burned through the circles of seekers in those days. Deep philosophical questions, metaphysical ones. Malankaputta had been waiting, patiently at first, then not so patiently, for the Buddha to weigh in. But the Buddha would only fall silent, or gently turn the conversation elsewhere. Why won't you answer me? That evening, Malankaputta walked toward the Buddha and finally let the words out. Blessed One, if you will not answer these questions, then I am leaving. I'll return to ordinary life. The air between them seemed to tighten. The other disciples went still, watching. The Buddha looked at him, slowly, without irritation, without alarm. Just that quiet, steady gaze. Then he asked a question of his own. Malankaputta, did I ever once say to you, come to me, and I will tell you whether the world is eternal? Malankaputta shook his head. No, you never said that. And when you came to me, did you say, I'll only practice if you answer these questions first? No, I didn't. The Buddha let a moment pass. The wind moved through the trees again. Then he began to speak quietly. Malankaputta, imagine a man who has been shot with a poisoned arrow. His companions rush to find a doctor. But the man holds up his hand and says, wait, I won't let you touch this arrow until I know what clan was the man who shot me. How tall was he? What color was his skin? Where did he come from? Malankaputta listened without moving. What kind of wood is the shaft made from? What bird's feathers are on the fletching? Is the arrowhead made of bone, or stone, or iron? I need to know all of this before you take it out. The Buddha's voice was unhurried, but each word landed, the way a stone drops into still water and just keeps rippling outward. What do you think would happen to that man? He would die. Before a single answer came, he would be gone. Silence. The Buddha continued. Whether or not the world is eternal, people are still born. They still grow old. They grieve. They suffer. They despair. That suffering is what I am here to address, right now in this very moment. Knowing the shape of the universe does nothing to ease it. That is why I have not spoken of those things. Malankaputta didn't move for a long time. Deep in the forest, a bird called once. Then the silence came back. Slowly, he lowered himself back to the ground. Not to question the Buddha, but to sit with a question he hadn't thought to ask yet. A question that was turning, quietly, toward himself. This parable, the poisoned arrow, is one of the most luminous in all of Buddhist teaching, and one of the most misread. Most people hear it this way: stop overthinking, focus on what's right in front of you. And in a sense, that's not wrong, but it only catches about half of what the Buddha was actually saying. The Buddha did not tell Malankaputta to stop asking questions. He asked him, is this the question you actually need to be sitting with right now? That distinction is everything. When we feel the pull of, I need to understand this, there are really two different hungers underneath it. The first kind reaches inward. It touches something raw and present in your own life. Why do I keep getting so angry? Why do I repeat the same patterns? What is it that I'm actually afraid of? These questions have roots. They go somewhere. The second kind reaches outward, and sometimes it reaches outward because looking inward is too uncomfortable. What is the meaning of the universe? Why do human beings exist? Is there a God? These aren't bad questions, but if the arrow is still inside you, and you spend your days absorbed in them, that's not curiosity. That's escape. So what was Malankya actually suffering from? It wasn't that he lacked answers. What he couldn't bear was the not knowing, and rather than sitting with that, he had decided the problem was the teacher, that he was in the wrong place, learning from the wrong person. This is the structure of a particular kind of pain. It isn't the absence of an answer that hurts. It's the belief that there must be an answer, that one is owed to us that makes the silence unbearable. I wonder if the Buddha's quiet wasn't an evasion, but a kind of gentle dismantling. Not of the questions, but of the grip we have around them. There's a direction to every question. Some move inward, toward the tender, unexamined parts of who you are. Others move outward, away from that discomfort, towards something abstract and safely distant. Curiosity, in its truest form, moves freely in both directions. But the moment it hooks onto fear, the need to have answers simply to feel safe, it stops being a tool for discovery. It becomes a way of not having to feel what's already here. And there's a deeper question hiding underneath all of this. Who is this you that wants to know? We speak easily about I'm trying to understand. I want to grow. But is that I a fixed thing? In the Buddhist view, the self is not a permanent object. It's something that arises moment by moment from the weaving together of circumstances. The person you were yesterday and the person you are today are not strictly identical. So who exactly is doing the asking? The one asking the question is already part of the question. We sometimes talk about keeping our curiosity alive, as if curiosity is a flame we tend. But the belief that there is a stable, unchanging me doing the tending is often what smothers the flame. I'm too old for this. This isn't the kind of thing someone like me does. These sentences assume a fixed self. They close a door that was never actually locked. What the Buddha modeled was a life lived inside the question, not rushing toward an answer, but walking steadily through the asking. That, I think, is what genuine curiosity looks like. Not collecting answers, staying awake to what you don't yet understand. So how does any of this land in an ordinary day? Let me offer 3 moments that might feel familiar. The first, when work stops making sense. When you hit a wall in your work, it's natural to ask, is this really the right path for me? That's an honest question, but it has a way of growing, quietly, without permission, into which job would make me happy? Which life is the right one? What's the answer? And then you can't sleep. Doesn't that echo something in Buddhist Story? The arrow is already inside, the suffering is already here, but before pulling it out, you're cataloging everything around it. The job market, the meaning of ambition, the nature of fulfillment. If the Buddha were sitting with you, he might ask, before all of that, what are you actually feeling right now? Can you just look at that first? The pain of being stuck at work is rarely just about the work. Most often it's about a belief underneath the work. Things shouldn't be this hard. I shouldn't still be struggling with this. The difficulty itself is just a fact. It becomes suffering in the moment you decide it shouldn't be happening. Turn the question slightly, not how do I fix this, but what am I feeling right now? And sometimes for the first time, you notice the arrow. The second moment, getting older. Somewhere in your 40s or 50s, a voice can start whispering, it's too late to begin something new. Curiosity is still there, but what's the point? Or who am I kidding? Arrive first. But that voice is assuming a fixed self, a closed version of who you are. 50 years of living have made you who you are today. Yes, but that person is not carved in stone. It's a living shape. Everything you've done, everything you've lost, everything still possible, held together in this moment. Is the image of the person who's already too late actually true? Or is it just one story, told from one angle? Curiosity doesn't answer the question, is it too late? It doesn't need to. It just responds, quietly, almost involuntarily, to whatever is genuinely interesting right now. Trusting that response is how you keep it alive. The third moment, a child asks you something you can't answer. Why is the sky blue? Why do people die? We tighten up. We feel we should have something good to say. We reach for the right answer, and the words don't come. But if the Buddha's teaching has anything to offer a parent in that moment, it might be this. Answering isn't everything. I don't actually know. Want to wonder about it together? What does a child receive from that? An adult who isn't ashamed of not knowing. An adult who is willing to sit inside a question without forcing a resolution. That in itself is a kind of teaching. Maybe the most important one. The poisoned arrow parable doesn't say, stop asking. It says, know which question you're actually sitting inside. Some questions are worth living in. Others are just ways of avoiding what's already here. A child who grows up beside an adult willing to say, I don't know, learns something no answer could have taught. That uncertainty is not a failure of intelligence, but a kind of honesty. That staying with a question without flinching is its own form of courage. Maybe that is where all three moments meet, not in finding the right answer, but in noticing which questions are pulling you toward life, and which ones are just keeping you up at night. Here's one small thing you might try, starting today. Just one. At some point during your day, a moment of friction, a flicker of, that's strange, a vague sense of something not quite right. Write it down, one line. That's all. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Something felt off when I said yes to that. I got annoyed and I'm not sure why. I noticed I avoided looking at my phone and I don't know what that was about. One line, in a notebook, a phone, a scrap of paper. Why this? What the Buddha was pointing Malankiyaputta toward was the question that lives closest to you. Not the vast metaphysical ones, but the small, immediate ones that hum just beneath the surface of your day. A sense of friction is where those questions are being born. You don't need to answer it. You just need to notice. Something moved in me today, here. In the Buddhist tradition, there's a practice called right mindfulness, which can sound complicated, but at its core means simply, keep noticing what is actually happening, right now, as clearly as you can. The Buddha and his students practiced this while walking, eating, breathing, a continuous gentle returning of attention to present experience. Writing down your small frictions is a humble version of that, an act of noticing. Something stirred inside me today. Then, 3 days later, read it back. Something will have shifted. Maybe the friction has dissolved, maybe it's grown, maybe it looks completely different from this slight distance. None of those outcomes are wrong. What changes is your relationship to it, and that is the beginning of something. I won't promise this will change your life, but staying curious about what moves inside you, even in small ways, keeps a door slightly open, and a door that stays open, even a little, lets light through. Noticing the arrow is the first step. Everything else follows from there. One woman in a meditation group I sat with years ago kept a battered yellow notepad in her jacket pocket for months, filling it with fragments like these. Why did I rush past him on the stairs? Couldn't finish my tea. She told me later she hadn't solved a single one of them, but that the notepad itself had become a kind of companion, proof that her inner life was worth a moment of her own attention. That was enough. When did you last let yourself sit inside a question, without rushing toward an answer? Not a question for someone else to solve. Not a question you needed to resolve by morning. Just a question you lived with for a while. Let breathe. Let be. Maybe something shifted during that time. Not because you found the answer, but because the question itself took you somewhere. Take a moment. Let yourself remember. A monk once spent 3 years asking why the river never tired of flowing, and by the end he had stopped asking. Not because he knew, but because he had become someone who no longer needed to. A farmer I heard of kept a single unresolved grief in his chest for so long that it softened, the way a stone smooths at the bottom of a stream. He never explained it to anyone, and he never needed to. The curiosity we explored today has a beautiful root story. We covered it in an earlier teaching about the teacup that was already too full to receive anything new. Perhaps something quietly came loose in Malankiyaputta that evening, there in the forest. Not because he finally got his answers, but because the grip, the belief that he was owed answers, that answers were the point, had loosened just a little. Curiosity is a strange thing. The anxious version, I need to know more, or I'm not safe. And the clear version, I simply want to understand, can feel identical from the inside. Both feel like wanting to know, but they come from entirely different places. And sometimes we are chasing distant questions, enormous questions, precisely because we can't bear to look at the small, close, tender one. But the parable doesn't end with pulling out the arrow. That's only where it begins. Once the structure of your suffering becomes a little clearer, once the arrow is out, the questions that remain are different, quieter, more yours. The things that still pull at you, still light something up, still make you lean forward. That's where your particular curiosity lives. Age doesn't touch that. Neither does what you've done or haven't done, who you've been or think you should be. If right now something makes you think, that's strange, or I want to understand that, then something in you is still moving, still alive to the world. The Buddha didn't close the door on questions. He asked, which direction is this question pointing? May your curiosity find its way gently inward, and may you be able to go on living, today and tomorrow, inside the question, and perhaps that is enough. Not to arrive anywhere, but to notice that you are still leaning forward, still, after everything, interested in what comes next. Whose face came to mind while you were listening today? One story a day. In a week, your words will change. In a month, your eyes will change. In a year, the same world will look completely different.